All right, welcome back to another episode of Blown Coverage. I'm Mike Bell with my co-host Caleb Schwoyer. Week 9 is ahead of us, and for the big games this week, it seems to be mostly about the SEC. Across there's a few big games in the Big Ten, but mostly this is the SEC this week, and you might start to see a little bit of separation and then also some chaos. And yeah, I say we just get right into it. Let's just start where game day is. It's where I always like to start. It's number 15 Missouri against number 10 Vanderbilt. This game is at 2:30 on ESPN. Vanderbilt is opened as a 2.5 point favorite, much like they did last week against LSU. What are your opening thoughts on this game specifically?
I think this could actually potentially be the best game of the day, just because I think both of these teams are pretty similar, just in the fact that they're very heavy on the run game. They both have pretty good offenses and pretty good defenses, rankings wise. In those rankings, you'd have to give a slight edge to Missouri, but in this, I guess you could say it's maybe arguable, but Vandy has had a slightly harder schedule, and want to put an emphasis on slightly. Um, but I would like to say, like, I think a huge thing is from a mental aspect of this is you have to give props to Missouri for battling through their hard fought game last weekend or a couple days ago against Auburn at Auburn. Considering that was they were coming off a very emotional loss against Alabama, which was a hard fought game too, and they had a chance to win. And Missouri, or not Missouri, Auburn is like, I know the record may not show it, but I really think that Auburn is it's not a gimme game by any means. Okay, and for them to come out and win, I think that kind of shows kind of how strong of a team they are, and yeah, I mean, mentally strong team is a dangerous team, in my opinion. Missouri has a great run game. It ranks fourth in the nation in time of possession, which I think will be huge in this game, just since both of them run the ball so heavily. So I think the path of success for Missouri to upset Vanderbilt is to lean into the run game, don't force the quarterback to get into must throw situations. He is interception prone. He's had seven this season so far. Um, for their defense, control Pavia, and you win. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Um, with it being at Vandy, and with it being at Vandy, and regardless, last week we were kind of talking about just the mental aspect for Vandy. Like, I don't question if they'll show up or not. Like, I think Pavia is a alpha dog amongst the rest of them, and he'll have the team like ready. Clark Lee is really good at that too. Um, I think he has the capabilities of being a very good game, and uh, honestly, man, it's really a toss up to be honest with you. Um, Really and truly, and that's why I think it could be like the best game of the day because I like sitting here. I can't really decide who I would want to pick, to be honest with you, and it may come down to like right before the game starts, to be honest with you. But what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think this is just a fun game because it's two of the league's like biggest surprises this year, and it's two teams that have been historically not very good. More
Yeah,
so Vanderbilt than Missouri, but I mean even Missouri, especially since joining the SEC, and Missouri
good
has
might
been
well be the first time both these teams have been top 15 playing. I forgot to mention that.
yeah.
It
Well, they
probably
have.
is.
Oh, it's got to be because they haven't faced that many times. I want to say they've only faced like a total in their history 15 times. I was looking at that earlier. So
Probably when Missouri first joined the SEC. Maybe a handful of times before that, but yeah.
right, right. Well, they were both in the SEC East, so they played while the divisions remained. But
Right.
yeah, Vanderbilt wasn't very good, so there for sure wasn't like a top 15 clash. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. I wonder if Missouri comes out with an attitude that they've been overlooked a little bit just because
Yeah,
of how much attention Vanderbilt has got.
especially with the win since LSU this past weekend.
Yes, yes. So like obviously, yeah, Vanderbilt has deserved the recognition for hanging with Bama, being undefeated until that, and then coming off the bye, beating LSU. You get a lot of credit for that. But Missouri's got to be saying, well, hey, look, we don't have that signature win yet, but we only lost to Bama by three. I mean, they were right in that game.
Right.
And why did they lose that game? Well, one of the reasons they lost that game was probably Bo Prabula.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately I trust Pavia more because, I mean, Bo still makes a lot of just kind of bad decisions. Like he had two interceptions last week. Just throwing the ball, he's not the best. Obviously, he's fun to watch because, like Pavia, they're both dual threats. Now, here could be the difference also, though. It's weird to say, but the best defense Vanderbilt has faced this year might end up being Missouri. Now, LSU was supposed to have a good defense, but LSU
Yeah,
has,
but
has struggled against the run and against the quarterback run specifically. Missouri, that's actually a strength of their team is to stop the run.
hmm
So they're one of the best teams in the nation at stopping the run. So that's going to force, if they can do that in this game, that's going to force Pavia to throw the ball a little bit more. So that keeps this very interesting to me. I'm with you. I don't know which way to go. And I think of Vandy being a 2.5 point favorite and knowing how Vegas works, they will put a line out there if they think the public's gonna be, you know, really one sided. And I could see the public really being like, oh, Vandy's all the talk right now. So is Vanderbilt getting this artificial inflation in terms of their points? So I don't know. I think it is going to be a fun game, and yeah, yeah. I'm also excited to see game day here. I don't even know what that would
yeah,
look.
that is yeah.
I'm also just curious. Their fans. They were in it last week. It's a smaller stadium. Just to see them come out. What is that going to look like? So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just excited for the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's probably gonna be the first time that game day has ever been to Vanderbilt before. And it's probably been quite some time since Missouri has like been a part of game day. I mean, don't quote me
Mhm.
on that, but just thinking, maybe the last time I can even think really is either that like I forgot when it was Kansas was one and Missouri was two, like back in 2007 or 2008. I want to say 2007 a little bit. Um, the last time that they had game day. So, um, anyway, you're right. I'm very excited to see how it goes, just because you don't always see game day at those schools. So,
Yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say about the game is like if Missouri were to win this game, I think an obvious path for them would be to get out to a lead early, kind of like they did against Alabama. Missouri also can be a little bit of a sloppy team with penalties, things like that. But if they are out to a big lead, I could see Vanderbilt having a tough time playing from behind. They haven't really had to do that, and when they have, I think they struggle. They struggle to force the ball downfield. That's not really their game. So just something to maybe think about. But let's move on here, and let's go to this game is going to be at 11 a.m. on ABC. Number 8 Ole Miss versus number 13 OU. OU's opened as a 4.5 point favorite. This is big. Stakes are big for both teams. Playoff implications, SEC implications, although maybe less so SEC, but still SEC implications. I'm curious to see how Ole Miss responds after their kind of gut punch of a loss last week, being up like that on Georgia. Now you have to go on the road to OU. OU feels like maybe they're still recovering a bit from the Texas loss. What are your thoughts on the game?
so really, when I was kind of looking up stuff about this game, it was very intriguing because at first glance, I was like, okay, I see why this is a big game from like a ranking standpoint. initially I was like, okay, Ole Miss though, I trust them a lot more than OU. Um, then on second glance, I was like, Ole Miss could be in some trouble though. OU has arguably one of the best defenses in the nation, if not the best. Their offense is pretty suspect. Okay, so I'm not going to say OU is flawless by any means because they're not. But I think if OU can do just enough on offense, be efficient, no turnovers, um, they may have a chance. And keep in mind, this past weekend, Ole Miss is coming off an emotional loss against Georgia. They played very well. They fought very hard, but their defense made Georgia's look like Arkansas's at times. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see kind of how both teams show up and play against each other. One thing I would like to say is Ole Miss is 58th in the nation in red zone defense, allowing opponents to score on 81% of trips, while OU's red zone offense ranks first in the nation, scoring on 100% of their red zone opportunities, which is kind of crazy because I before reading up on this, I wouldn't have guessed that by any means. They're playing at Oklahoma. Ole Miss may be in some trouble because Norman can get pretty loud, especially for big games like this. So,
Yeah,
yeah. Uh,
yeah. I
what are
feel
your
like
thoughts?
I feel like OU has they're kind of in a position now where they're starting to get overlooked a little bit after that
They definitely
Texas.
are.
Because if you remember a couple weeks ago, prior to Mateer getting hurt, everyone was kind of talking about OU. They were
As a
in the
national,
top
yeah.
five,
Mhm.
and I mean they were looking good. They beat Michigan, who yeah is not an elite team, but they're still back in the top
Still very
25.
good.
Yeah,
Very
still
good
good,
two-loss team.
right? And then they were coming off that Auburn win, and obviously Auburn hasn't looked that good, but they got through it. And their loss was to Texas, and let's face it, it was a rivalry game. But Mateer first game back. By the way, something we didn't mention is he didn't practice all week, which
Yeah, that's
that's
true, which is
a big deal.
huge.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
a
huge.
big deal.
And
Uh,
Texas' defense is one of the better ones in the country, too.
yes,
So
yes,
it's not like, I mean, that's a pretty hard ask of your quarterback. So,
right, right. So I think a lot of people are just kind of forgetting about OU in kind of a weird way. But if they lose this game, they're really going to start to forget about them because their schedule, it's the number one schedule left in the country in terms of the strength of schedule.
yeah.
So I think this is a classic strength on strength battle. The Ole Miss offense versus the
Yeah.
OU defense. I am very excited to see that. Ole Miss feels like an offense that isn't going to be just stopped. And I want to say this about OU's defense. They're very good. They've only allowed 213 yards a game. That's extremely impressive. They're clearly legit. But here's the thing, they really haven't faced a good offense yet. Think about the offenses that they've faced: Texas, Auburn, Michigan. Michigan can run the ball, but especially you got to remember that was Underwood's like one of his first games. They're pretty one dimensional. That was at OU.
Right. And for a very good defense, it's pretty easy if you're very run heavy to stop that. And anyway, yes.
Right. And that South Carolina last week, South Carolina has been having major issues. So could this OU offense now expose OU's defense in a way that they haven't been? And kind of like we were talking about in the last game, how does OU do when they have to play catch up? I don't see OU as that type of team at all. Now, I don't
Not
think
if they let Ole Miss loose. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I don't think Ole Miss is going to score 40 like they did last week, but I do think they're going to put up some points here. Now, on the other side, it's like Ole Miss doesn't have an elite defense, but here's the thing: OU, they don't run the ball, and
Yeah. I think
that's
that's going
Ole
to be the
Miss's
key.
weakness is
Yeah.
against the run. Now, last week OU started to run the ball a little bit better against South Carolina. Could that be a sign that they're trying to maybe balance out the attack a little more? They ran for 171 yards last week. It just doesn't feel like what they do, but I think if they want to be like a great team, they're going to have to figure that out, especially against Ole Miss, like because that is their weakness is Ole Miss's rush defense. So yeah, I'm very fascinated by this game. It would not surprise me if this line closes closer to a pick 'em by game time because I don't really think of OU as a big favorite in this game. Not that 4.5 points is a lot, but I do want to say this also. If Ole Miss does get up and it's a close game in the fourth quarter, actually whether they're up or not, I want to see how Ole Miss can close out against a good opponent. Because remember, last week they were
Yeah,
up.
last week that's exactly what happened. Their last two drives, Georgia. Yeah.
Right, right. So how can Ole Miss do in the fourth quarter? So that's a big thing I'm watching.
Which to say, that's that's a hard task. Like, that doesn't go lightly. I guess I don't know how to say that exactly, but Kirby Smart, his defense, making adjustments like when it matters, like that's just what he does. So like no slide against Ole Miss's offense by any means. I think the key thing is going to be OU's run offense against Ole Miss's run defense. Um, just to give some pressure off or get some pressure off of Mateer of having to like basically have the whole offense on his back. And he's been a little interception prone too this year. I want to say like the last time I looked at his or touchdown to interception ratio, honestly, it was pretty bad. Like it was like one
Seven
touchdown.
touchdowns, 6 interceptions.
That's what I was thinking. I was like 1-1 if I'm not mistaken, but which is not good. But the whole offense is driven off of him. Which if the defense knows that you can't run the ball, it's just going to kind of make that more likely to happen. So I still think John Mateer's a good quarterback, and frankly I still think OU could potentially be. I think they could be like a pretty decent playoff team if they're able to somehow develop a good run game. If they can do that by the end of the season, which there is still some time left, but they have the hardest schedule, like you said. So, I mean, it's going to be extremely hard for them to do that. But if they can, I mean, OU is very dangerous. So,
Well, if they win this game, people are going to be talking about them again in that kind of way. Just, looking at that schedule, I mean, next week at Tennessee, then at Alabama, host Missouri, then host LSU to end the year. That's tough, and you already have that one loss, like we were saying. So, can you afford to drop one more? Sure, but just one more, and you got to do well against the others. So it starts with Ole Miss, your favorite, you're at home. So yeah, this is going to be fun for me because I really want to see how these two teams, their strengths interact with each other.
oh, for
The
sure.
offense, defense. So
Yeah, exactly. I know that. So I know there's not like huge matchups per se this weekend, like compared to the last two, but it's like the big games that we do have. I mean, not that they're more interesting than the ones that have happened in the past week, but they're still very interesting. Just because, like you said, like the two games that we've talked about so far, Missouri, Vandy, almost the same exact team going at it, and then like you said, strength on strength going at each other. Ole Miss offense against that OU defense. Who will win that game will determine like which one's for real or not. Ole Miss's offense or OU's defense. So I mean,
it's
very interesting storylines.
it's teams in similar tiers that are looking to break to the tier above.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they have the opportunity to do, and teams that are desperate to not, drop a tier. So while we're talking about the Ole Miss game, I wonder if Ole Miss is going to at all be distracted because Lane Kiffin now is in the conversations for the Florida job. And by the way, game that we're about to cover, if something happens with Brian Kelly,
Yeah, right.
he's going to be in the conversation for that job too. He's considered a very hard coach to get, but it
Lane
is
Kiffin is.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
but
I think his daughter goes to Ole Miss, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's true, but if there are two jobs that he would consider based off what I've been reading and hearing, it is Florida and it is LSU. And Florida's open. So that's going to be interesting to see how he handles that, especially if they keep winning games. Like people are just going to keep talking about him. So that's
Well,
going to be very interesting.
what's crazy because I saw the same thing you did, but Ole Miss every year, like when it comes to recruiting classes, Ole Miss is like never really at the top. Now I don't know what number they're at. I just know they're not necessarily in the top five, but yet every year Lane Kiffin is like keeping them very competitive. Now I know the last couple of years it's been like 8-4. 8-4 is what they were last year. I mean, at least half the season they're like a top 10 team, and after that they fizzle out. Okay. Um, I think Lane Kiffin is a really good coach. Would I be happy if my team got him? I mean, I'd probably be fine with it, actually. I mean, I love Steve Sarkisian, but like, let's say if just something drastically happened with him, I'd be okay with Lane Kiffin going in there. Um, that is so. I don't know. I think he's pretty tied down to Ole Miss. I'd be surprised if he left, to be honest with you, just because, like, the question I have is Florida really that much better of a job than Ole Miss? I really don't know, to be honest with you.
I
Now,
think yes. I think by a lot. I think recruiting's easier. I
well,
was
that's
watching
true. Okay,
tonight
fine.
the
Yeah.
facilities. They just upgraded the facilities there. From my understanding, I guess there's a connection between Lane Kiffin and Steve Spurrier. So he would be kind of looked at as a successor there for Florida, and that would maybe be a big deal to him. And it's a decently big sized program. Like it's not like a Alabama, but it's better than Ole Miss. Ole Miss is kind of like middling to low end SEC. Florida is, I think, a bigger beast. So yeah, I think it would be an upgrade. So yeah,
I guess the only thing I would say to that is I just feel like Lane Kiffin, it's pretty much like whatever he wants, he gets at Ole Miss.
yeah,
And maybe the only part to that may not be true is like maybe as much of a recruiting budget. I don't know. I mean, he portals very well. Which I mean, you're right, and that is a pretty big focus as far as Florida, like what makes them a very intriguing team to go coach. I mean, you're right there in one of the best states for athletes. So from that standpoint, if Len Kiffin did leave and he goes there, that's the first thing I would kind of want to take a look at is just to see kind of how quickly can he turn that program around and get like a really good recruiting class. Also, I think every name that we've talked about thus far, like James Franklin, I wonder if Florida. I mean, I think Lane Kiffin would be the number one choice for Florida by no stretch. But if he says no, which I think that's a possible answer as well, who would Florida go after? I think it could turn into a potential bidding war. Florida and Arkansas for James Franklin.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it also just depends on what LSU does. If they retain
Oh
Brian
yeah,
Kelly,
that's okay. Yes, I forgot about that aspect too. Yes.
yeah, and then Florida State. I think I just saw that they plan to keep Mike Norvell for at least
Oh
another
yeah,
year.
that's right. They
That's
were
an
talking about that.
interesting situation.
Yeah.
You know, he's been there for 6 years. He had two good seasons, but then the other four are like just downright disasters. Like they're not even. And keep in mind, this is in the ACC.
Yeah.
It has not been a great conference. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, they've been really. They still haven't won an ACC game now in over a
Well, we
year.
forgot to talk about this in our reaction show a couple days ago. I want to say that they lost this past weekend.
They
I
did to
forgot who they lost.
Stanford.
Stanford. Yes, Stanford. I mean, how does
It's a
that
problem.
happen? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
problem. Yeah, it's definitely a problem.
The thing is,
Um,
I think his buyout is like 100 million, and
oh,
at some point that buyout matters. You know, so I
well,
think that's
you might be rooting for that, so Jimbo won't be talked about any longer when it comes to that, huh?
well. Look, I mean, I think if I'm Florida State, I'd rather have Jimbo at this point. I'd take Jimbo back. Seriously.
Hey,
Seriously, it's hard to win in the SEC. He just couldn't do it in the SEC. I bet he can do a better job than Mike Norvell. Just my opinion.
maybe. Um, but in all seriousness, though, I think if Florida were even able to get James Franklin, if Lane Kiffin turned down the job, I'd be very interested to see what James Franklin were able to do there. Just because between the two, between Penn State and Florida, I'd probably say Florida. Like I would give the edge to Florida for sure. Like, what are your thoughts on that? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would give the edge to Florida. It just comes with, I mean, Penn State has high expectations, but I mean,
Florida
Florida's
does too.
high
Yeah, Florida.
expectations,
Yeah.
maybe more so, and it's the SEC, and
Hmm.
people are going to be questioning, like, well, hey, you couldn't win the big game there. Why could he here? Well, I would argue, well, look, you may get better talent acquisition there. Another name, though, and I've mentioned it, I think, every week, and he brought up coaching in the SEC, and that is John Gruden. I'm telling you, like, I would watch out for that name, John Gruden. I think that would be so much fun, and it kind of makes sense, honestly, at Florida to see him coach there. You could totally see that.
I think actually I don't know where he lives, but I mean it would make sense for him to live in that meme that they just talk about like Florida people or whatever, like that they just do the craziest things. And if John Gruden lives in Florida, like it would just make complete sense. Um, I'd be interested to see how he adapts to college and the recruiting aspect of it, you know, because he didn't really have to deal with that in the NFL at all. So, the last time he coached was like what 3-4 years ago with the Raiders. So I'm
Yeah,
not
I
saying
mean,
it would be a bad hire because I think overall, honestly, like if he could just like get through the adaptation part the first season, I think he'd be a great coach. I think he'd be now the players might have a different story. They might be a little scared, which I definitely would be. But yeah, I think like if I were a recruit, I would definitely have to put Florida in the mix just because of John Gruden. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, I'm just going through Google here, and he's one of the top names, and he's saying like he's getting prepared to coach again, and it's going to be in college if he coaches. So yeah, I think it'll either be there or Arkansas. I don't see him going to Penn State. I think it's going to be there or Arkansas. So that'll be fun, I guess, to see.
May, uh, like you
If
said,
I'm
maybe even
Arkansas, I would
LSU.
love to have John Gruden.
Do what now?
I don't know if LSU would do that. I feel like LSU would want a more proven guy in college. I don't know.
I guess it would just depend on like what names are out there by the end of the year. You know?
Well, look, let's go ahead and let's move on to our next game. Speaking of LSU, it's the
Yeah.
game that I'm obviously going to have the most attention on. 6:30 ABC. It's number 3 Texas A&M versus number 20 LSU. A&M is opened as a 2.5 point favorite. I'll start off with my thoughts since it's my team. Look, A&M, this is their best start since 1994, 7-0. Ironically, the last time they won in Baton Rouge, 1994. This game, several years, the winner of this game has been the home team. LSU, you've heard me mention it before. It is, in my opinion, the toughest place to play on the road, especially at night. And
Hmm.
that is where this will be. LSU has their backs against the wall here, coming off the loss to Vandy. They've already got 2 losses. Now, Brian Kelly, people are calling for his head, and the LSU fans do not like that guy. Like, they want him gone last week. And LSU is kind of in a position where if they drop this game, they've got Alabama next. They still have OU on the schedule. They may have someone else. I think that's it in terms of like the big teams. But they're looking at like a potential another 8-4 season or worse. So would LSU tolerate one more season like that? I don't know. I feel like it's still too early to call for Brian Kelly's job. The thing is, their fans are just different. Like they want success now, and to them, success is not 9 and 10 win seasons. It is being in contention to win it all every year. Like
However
Alabama,
unrealistic that may be, yes.
right, right. Now I could totally see Brian Kelly just kind of not being. It's been kind of weird since the moment he got there with like the weird promo stuff, the accents
Yeah.
he was doing. Like it does,
Yes. I was
like
going to bring that up. That,
yeah,
it
it
was so
does.
weird too. Because within 2 weeks, he went back to his regular accent. I, very strange, man.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things. He's like it's maybe doomed to fail. As far as this week, LSU, one thing I think that was unfair to them, and I don't really understand why this happened. After they lost to Vandy, they were the number 10 team in the country. They lose what was a pretty close game throughout, and then they drop 10 spots all the way to 20. I feel like that's kind of a big drop. And then now if they lose this week, like they could probably still remain.
Considering that they put Vandy at 10.
Yeah, yeah, like it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But honestly, it's going to be even more motivation for LSU. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, as an A&M fan, like that has me worried. Now, what's interesting is LSU was in a similar spot last year. Their back was against the wall. They had two losses, and they had a night game against Alabama, and they got beat against Alabama. And that was last year's Alabama team. Other than that, though, they've been very good at night under Brian Kelly. I want to say that's the only game they've lost at night, at home, obviously. So, what can I say? The biggest edge for LSU in this game is the spot. Because if you're just comparing the teams based off what you've seen, you probably would have to say, yeah, it seems like this is a good matchup for A&M. And I would agree. But going back to the beginning of the season for A&M, there were three games that was kind of circled. That were circled at Notre Dame, at LSU, at Texas. And LSU, if you would have asked, was probably the one that everyone said you can probably pencil this one in as a loss. Like it's probably the toughest game because Notre Dame, people didn't really know what they were going to be. Texas is just a rival; things happen. But LSU, especially this year, they had high expectations. Kind of penciled in as a loss. And obviously, we're here now, and it's not penciled in as a loss because A&M's the favorite, right? I would just still say A&M, even though they're undefeated, it is not by any means a perfect team, and LSU still has a lot of talent. The one thing is, LSU has yet to be able to defend a mobile quarterback, and that is what A&M has. Granted, he is more of a passer than, say, a Pavia type, but he will run the ball if he needs to. That's going to be interesting because LSU's not the type of team offensively now to just light it up. They're not going to put up 40 on A&M. So this is really about their defense. How much can they contain A&M's offense, which isn't the best in the country. It's probably like overall just an above average offense. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. LSU, they're 117th in rushing yards. They're not going to run the ball that effectively. Can Nussmeier pass the ball? The thing is about A&M's defense is they're pretty good when they face teams with obvious flaws, with teams that are like one dimensional. And that's kind of what LSU is. So again, like if I'm just comparing the teams, I get why a lot of people would choose A&M, but I have to respect like the spot. And that is it's a night game at LSU. Their backs are like majorly against the wall. If they lose this game, they're out of everything. Like they're not going to be in the playoff. They're not going to be in any SEC thing. So for that reason, I mean, look, the line's close. It wouldn't surprise me if this closed. Pick them, kind of like previous games we've talked about. I will if A&M wins this game. I mean, it's hard to imagine them not running the table. They have at Missouri, which is tough, and then at Texas, which could be tough. But this is the toughest of those three. And I, for now, will tell you I'm kind of expecting LSU to win this game. But it's going to be really fun to watch. And yeah, I guess that's really everything I have to say about the game.
Yeah, literally, I really think you were just reading from my notes, to be honest, because pretty much what you said uh, is exactly what I had down. I would say, just to add to it, I would say, like at this point in the season, who has shown more consistency, A&M. Okay. The only reason why I would give LSU a shot is just like you said exactly. The combination of playing at LSU, but also being in a must-win situation, not only for the team, but also for Brian Kelly, which can make the team a little bit more motivated too. Honestly, LSU's offense has been pretty subpar. Their defense has played well. and y'all's offense, I mean, you're not necessarily wrong. They're top 40 in all major categories, and their defense is just slightly behind that. Um, so y'all just have been more consistent than LSU has thus far. It's like every other week. Like, what are you going to get from Nussmeier or just the entire LSU or offense? Excuse me. So I think honestly, the path for victory here for you guys is just have a good run game. You're 15th in the nation in time of possession. Don't force Marcel Reed to get into pass situations. As long as you guys don't do that, I think you have pretty good success. I think you'll have a pretty good shot at winning this game. But not to say that that will be easy, just because I think it's going to be a very emotional game. Number one, because it's a potential for them to knock off a top 5 team at home in this must-win situation for Brian Kelly. Because if he loses, I mean, you're right. What's the percentage that he's gone within a couple weeks, maybe even? I don't know. Um, I think it'll be a good game, though, honestly, because this is. I feel like for the majority of the time, it's been an interesting game to watch every year. So, um, I don't know, but I would like to say this: you'll have to give A&M credit if they go into LSU. Why are you smirking?
I just love to hear that. Keep going and complimenting A&M. I love it.
So, guys, if we did this podcast last year, Michael would have to do the same thing here if he were being unbiased. Okay, especially November. That's all I was going to say. You have to give A&M credit if they go in there and pull it off, because, like you said, LSU is probably the hardest. I mean, really, like who would you say maybe would even make it a competition of who had the hardest stadium to go play at night or whatever?
I would say at Penn State during a whiteout.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say Auburn. That is a tough place.
Ohio State, maybe.
Yeah, Ohio State's a weird one because, like, yes, but is that more so just because their team is elite, or is it because the environment's elite? It's probably a great environment too, but the level that the environment raises LSU is different from the environment raising Ohio State. So, like, it's
Do you
just
remember
it's.
what they said on game day when they first of all, yeah, that interview they did with Lane Kiffin on game day was pretty funny. But they were asking, how are you gonna do your last second adjustments uh to Chambliss when he was out there, like in this environment, being the loudest environment he's gonna play in, being at Athens, Georgia. He was like, well, I'll tell you this. I forgot what quarterback it was, but when he was playing or when he was offensive coordinator at Alabama, I forgot what quarterback it was for, but he whistled at him at LSU at night and he heard him. So he's like, I'm not really worried. He referenced LSU in specific for a reason, right? So, yeah, I mean, maybe Alabama's state, maybe Alabama too.
Yeah, I don't know. I would probably put Tennessee up there
Yeah.
at Tennessee. I mean, it's
And I mean,
biased.
A&M too. So, like, I think A&M too. Okay. Um, I would say this. I think Texas is a little underrated. The only thing I would say about that is just like when we have huge games there, like Texas gets pretty rocking. But like if we don't have a huge game, it's like not that same level. So that's the only reason why I would knock Texas. But if we're playing like a huge matchup, like believe that when you guys come to Austin, I mean it is going to be insanely crazy.
Yeah, but that's a different level though. I mean, you're talking. Look, every stadium can get crazy, but you're talking about you're asking comparisons to LSU, and Texas just isn't on that level and
Well,
never
okay,
has.
I would agree to that because they're always it's they have consistency and also
I'm not talking about consistency. I'm talking about just in the big games. Like LSU is a different level. I think A&M is a different level. Tennessee is known for that. Texas really, it's just look up the rankings. Texas will never be in like the top like 15 to 20.
never say never.
A&M, it's just not what they do. But anyway, I'm excited for the game, but since you want to talk a little bit about Texas, let's go ahead and talk about Texas. They face Mississippi State this week, and how are you feeling about that game being what you watched last week?
Um, yeah, I'm definitely nervous. Just because Mississippi State is better than Kentucky. They have the 98th. Hold on one second. So the run defense is pretty bad, ranking at 98th in the country, just under 200 yards per game, and that's exactly what Texas needs, honestly, because we need a run game to help support Arch. And basically, just our defense needs to show up as they have done and just play slightly better in the past game. Because last week there were a little leaky at some points in the game, and that quarterback is not as good as Shapen is for Mississippi State. So interesting. Another little trivia thing is their top wide receiver, Brennan Thompson, is actually a Texas transfer. So anyway, little nugget of information for you for the day, free. But yeah, I think especially playing at Mississippi State, yeah, I mean, I'm not excited about this just because not to think that or say that Mississippi State is going to have a huge like home advantage or anything on us, but and it honestly it pissed me off a little bit because everybody was like coming at Arch again for the way he played against Kentucky. But what do you
The O
expect him
line,
to do? It?
yeah, the O line.
Yeah, like what do you expect a quarterback, regardless who it is, to do? Like if he, as soon as he hikes, he's already about to get tackled. Like you can't expect much. If anything, you have to almost give him some sort of applause for how much he's accomplished this year. Because and actually, let me go look at this real quick. If you want to say something, you can. Because every time I look at it, that his numbers surprise me because it's like holy crap, our offense really has not played that well at all. And he's, got this many touchdowns, and the majority of them have come against the uh, cupcakes on our schedule for sure. But still, they count, right?
They count. And I guess just while you're looking that up, I would say, you said that Mississippi State is better than Kentucky. I agree. The thing is, it may be a better matchup for y'all, though, for the reasons of Mississippi State does not defend against the run very well. And that's an opportunity for you guys and for Arch because I know he likes to run the ball. And they also don't get after the passer very well. Now, again, good for Arch, but here's the deal: if Mississippi State is still getting after the passer, being that that's not what they do, then then good luck because this is a Mississippi State offense that can move the ball better than Kentucky, as you were saying. So that's all I have to say about it. But yeah, you can go ahead if you found whatever stat.
Yeah, I just briefly, and I don't like think this is like, I think it's pretty good given the arsenal that we have to work with, meaning the offensive line. Okay, Arch has 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Okay, is that spectacular? No, not necessarily, but that's better than a lot of other teams' quarterbacks that you'd probably put ahead of Texas at this point in the season. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say about that. Like you said, yes. I mean, if Mississippi State's defense is able to go out there like and kill Arch, um, and our defense isn't able to contain the pass as well as it previously has, yeah, we could be in some trouble for sure. I would still probably have to give the slight edge to Texas, but there's definitely a chance for Mississippi State to show up and win this game.
Yeah, I think this is a good kind of get right spot for Texas in the sense that this is kind of their last opportunity for a get right spot against a suspect defense. So if there's something they want to work on offense, get some confidence, this is the week because all of a sudden, y'all's schedule is starting to look a little bit interesting. You
Yeah,
host
I know.
Vanderbilt
Beginning of the
next,
year, guys, this guy was saying, "Man, that schedule," and
and
I just,
it still is very
I don't know
favorable.
about that, but
But you host Vanderbilt, and that's not going to be an interesting game no matter what happens this week.
for sure.
Next game at Georgia, pencil that in as a loss. The next game, and this is I think a very fascinating game, is
Yeah.
hosting Arkansas because Arkansas is not going to be stopped. They are going to score. Now, their defense can't stop anybody either. They can score, and I think they're going to score against Texas because they score against everybody. Now, I'm sure Texas will also be able to score on that defense, but how are they at that point of the season? Because is Arch still having issues? So that may look like the easiest game. It may not be the easiest game. And then obviously at the end of the year, they
Right.
host A&M. So point being, Texas now is in a position where it's like they shouldn't feel comfortable about any of these games going forward. So it's going to be an interesting team to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I still am just chuckling a little bit just you saying that our schedule. But I mean, yes, we play at Mississippi State. Then after the next 4 games, man, it's 3 top 10 teams at this point in the season. And I honestly, Arkansas is just very dangerous. I think they're very capable of upsetting anybody that they play. Um, and they very well could upset Texas for sure. And it may not even be an upset by the time we play them. I don't know. We'll have to see, I guess. But um, their offense is very dangerous. Texas is in a spot, man, where it's like, the fans just need to chill out on Arch and just kind of realize that we might need to just start looking at next year and really judge to see how Sarkisian does in this portal. Not to say that he's going to be on the hot seat next year by any means, or he should not be, I will say. But yeah, and maybe we overlooked like getting some offensive linemen, whatever. But upcoming schedule for Texas, it's going to be a little scary because man, if we lose Mississippi State, I think honestly our defense matches up pretty well with Vandy's offense,
Yeah.
just because very run heavy, and that's the strength of our defense, which is pretty good all around, but especially good against the run. But anyway, we don't have to go on a tangent with Texas. But anyway, is this game dangerous that we play this Saturday? Yes, it is. If we're able to go in there and win, I think that it'd be a pretty good win. And Jeff Lebby, honestly, a couple weeks ago, people were like, dang, he's actually doing something down there, because he barely lost against Tennessee. There was another pretty good team, too, that it was a very competitive game. I forgot who it was, but right off the top of my head. But and this is what, his second year? Yeah, I'm pretty certain, right? Second year. This would be a great win for him. Now, I hope it doesn't happen, but it's kind of like do or die moment for the season per se, not necessarily Jeff Levy's job. But if they lose this game, they're 4-4, so
Yep.
they can still make a bowl for sure. But as
Yeah, it's
far
a
as like,
tough schedule.
yeah, right,
Okay, well, let's briefly maybe dive into just what other games may be going on. I don't know which ones maybe catch your eye. There's one at 11 that maybe people will be overlooking, and that is UCLA versus Indiana. And I'm
mm,
just saying, UCLA has been playing a lot better. Like,
whatever it
I
is, yeah.
Indiana to take care of business, don't get me wrong, but the spread on the game was 24.5. I actually think it could be closer than that. UCLA kind of had a little bit of a step back last week because they barely beat Maryland 20-17. But you know what? They
Maryland's
still,
not a bad team though,
yeah, yeah.
by any
So
means.
I'm just saying, be prepared for that game to be a little closer. Anything on that game, and then any other game you want to talk about?
I don't necessarily have anything on the UCLA and the Indiana game. I think the Illinois Washington game could be pretty good, just because really I think both of those teams are kind of in the same spot in the Big Ten, meaning you have your first tier of the Big Ten teams. You got Oregon, Ohio State. Dang, who was the other team? Forgot off the top.
Indiana.
Oh, Indiana. And then who else behind there, right? And I think Illinois, Washington are kind of right there in the mix. So Washington's got both a pretty good offense and defense. I think Altmaier, uh, I think he covers some boo boos for Illinois just as the team. Um, with them playing at Washington, which that is a pretty like in big games or big situations, which I think this is, just because the way that Washington lost last week to Michigan, I think their crowd shows up and propels Washington to win. Because Washington's had, both these teams are 5-2, and you could probably argue and say maybe Illinois has had slightly better or harder schedule to play against versus Washington. But anyway, I think they're overall Washington on both sides of the ball is just slightly better than Illinois. However, Illinois, their quarterback Altmaier is very good.
Yeah, I don't know what I think about that because look, Illinois has two losses, and it's to the number one and number two team in the country. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
and they beat USC. Whereas Washington, yeah, they've looked good, but then their two chances against good teams, Ohio State, okay, they lost, and then Michigan, they lost. So this is kind of a chance for both teams to, like you were saying, have a chance to be that fourth team in the Big Ten. It's kind of a little crowded right now. Kind of the last chance for both these teams to be relevant. You lose this one, you kind of fade away into the middle of the Big Ten. So yeah, I still don't know what I think about Illinois. I think they're good. I think it's a tough spot for them though. After Washington lost, it's at Washington, a cross country trip basically. I think this is the first time Illinois is going to ever play at Washington. So yeah, it is going to be a fun game to watch for sure. It's fun to watch the Big Ten as well. Just trying to decide who that fourth team will be. There's still a lot of teams like in contention for that. So yes, I agree. That's going to be a fun game. One more game for me is BYU against Iowa State. Can BYU keep their voodoo magic alive? And also, Iowa State is off a bye here. Iowa State should be the better team, but I've said that against BYU now for like 3 straight weeks. The thing is, BYU,
No
they're
point.
coming
You'll
off
be
some
right.
like, well, yeah, they're coming off some like pretty battle tested wins. And I think it helps Iowa State. They're getting healthier. They've had some injuries coming off the bye. I could just see that kind of being BYU's last stand. So I'm excited to see that one. Big 12 implications, obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think you have to give BYU some props for being able to win against Utah. Um, Utah's always just one of those teams that they're just very sound in what they do. Um, so huge props to them for that. Like you said, Iowa State's coming off a bye week with the two previous games being losses to Colorado and Cincinnati. Okay, and their coach, by the way, Matt Campbell, he's definitely one under the radar for one of these bigger jobs. Now, I don't know if he'd actually leave Iowa State to go to these places, but that guy is what he has been able to do with Iowa State. I mean, it's honestly pretty crazy. I don't know how many years he's been there. He's probably almost been there for about 10 years, 10 to 15 years by this point. And before him, Iowa State was pretty much irrelevant every year, and he has brought them like crazy amount of results, honestly, in my opinion, given the program. Um, can Iowa State control their run game and force some turnovers? BYU doesn't turn the ball over. They rank 14th in the nation with a 6+ margin. So if Iowa State wants to have a decent shot at winning this game, run the ball, make BYU turn the ball over, and win the turnover battle for the day. I think that'll be the key there.
Agreed. Okay, two more games. I don't have a lot to say about them, but just quickly Alabama at South Carolina and then USF at Memphis. Those are just two games I'll kind of be keeping an eye on. Big for USF if they can win this game, they're virtually a lock to be that power group of whatever it's called for Power Five team that gets in. Because Memphis, this would have been a great game if Memphis could have just won last week.
Yeah, yeah.
But now it's like, but if Memphis now wins this game, I don't know who that team's going to be. of the group of five. There's Navy is a candidate, but I don't know why they have it where one of those teams has to get in. Like if they're having a really good year, fine. But what if they all lose 2 games? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But then I wanted to bring up Alabama and South Carolina quickly because South Carolina is really bad. Alabama is really good, but kind of a classic letdown game.
Mm-hmm.
Letdown
Trap
spot.
game for Alabama for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Just because I want to say that their next game is LSU. That or they have a bye week next week. I don't remember. I think next game's LSU. And and it's just like, okay, they're coming off this like slate of tough games, and now it's just South Carolina, but it's on the road, and South Carolina is going to give them their best shot. So just something to keep an eye on there. But yeah, don't know if you have any thoughts on those games.
You know, briefly, I don't really have anything to say necessarily, but the Kansas State Kansas game, that's always kind of an interesting game just because interstate in-state rivals. My uncle lives like 20 minutes away from Lawrence, so that's always kind of an interesting game to watch for me personally. I think maybe an underrated game is going to be the Auburn Arkansas game, just because like earlier we were talking about with um, oh goodness, what were those teams? I forgot. Strength on strength, basically. Oh, Ole Miss and OU. So, what's the strength of Auburn? Their defense. What's the strength of Arkansas? Their offense. So, if you slap numbers next to their names, this would be like a top tier matchup. But because they're both unranked, it's kind of getting overlooked, in my opinion. I think it has the makings to be a pretty good game. And honestly, I think whoever wins this game, it's a pretty good win. I know Arkansas is. Hold on one second here. Yeah, Arkansas is 2-5. Auburn's 3-4. Okay, but I think they're both good teams. Like I know it
I know,
sounds crazy, huh?
yeah, I know what you mean.
Because I know it's crazy to say that about Arkansas being 2-5, but man, I'm telling you, man,
The
just
best 2-5 team you'll ever see.
but yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anyway, just briefly looking at games, that's definitely one that will be interesting. It starts at 11:45 on SEC Network, so I'd have to go back and kind of just look and see what other games come on at the 11 o'clock slot to see what games would be in competition with watching it. Oh, Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Okay. I mean, I can have that on Two Vision, but anyway, I think that's another good one. Did you see any other ones that you saw that might be interesting, regardless of rank or
I
whoever?
guess briefly, I'll just mention Minnesota versus Iowa, both five
Five
and
and
two,
two.
both
Mhm.
3-1 in the Big Ten. I still don't think either one of those teams are going to be the fourth team in the Big Ten, but they're both kind of surprisingly 3-1. And Iowa has been all of a sudden looking good after they like looked really bad the
They're a
first
weird
like
team for sure.
games of the season, and then they just blew out Wisconsin. Their quarterback looked bad. I didn't think they'd be able to put up that many points, and they had like 30. I think it was 37-0, and then last week they had a good win versus Penn State, which is still I think they get credit for that because Penn State's very talented. So they won, and then now Minnesota coming off that big win against Nebraska. Whoever wins this will be 4-1 in the Big Ten and probably gets ranked. And just one to maybe keep an eye on. But other than that, that's about all I got.
Yeah, so how Iowa was able to score as many points as they did is they had the punter out there punting the ball to the wide receiver on the offensive drives. That's kind of how they do things over there, and it worked out pretty well for them that game. And that being said, I was thinking about this week though. Luke Fickell, the coach for Wisconsin, remember him being like a hot name maybe like 3 to 4 years ago before he took the Wisconsin job when he made Cincinnati pretty relevant again. Because up to
Mhm.
that point, the last time Cincinnati was relevant was when Brian Kelly was there, and then Luke Fickell went there and kind of turned them into something. And then he went to Wisconsin, and it just hasn't worked out for whatever the reason may be. So I was kind of thinking about that. Like, does Wisconsin move on from him? And I think Wisconsin's a very hard, very hard, especially now with so many great elite teams being in the Big Ten. Because before Luke Fickell was there, I don't know if somebody was between him and Brett Belima, the Illinois coach, or not. But the only time Wisconsin might have had a couple spotty years or whatever before this. I mean, who knows? I'm not the Wisconsin historian, but I remember like when we were middle school and stuff, Wisconsin being very good
Mhm.
for maybe about 5 years, as long as they have Brett Belima there. Um, and even if they don't necessarily have the best record, I don't want to ever like necessarily say it's like an easy win per se. You know,
Yeah,
I think it's they're still may not be the best win, but it'll be a quality win, I guess you could say.
agreed. Okay, well, I think that about does it. I'm looking forward to this week. Go Aggies, and I will see you next time.
All right, see you.